And welcome back to the Hot Lap and controversy in Spain. It was quite an, I don't want to say boring, but exceedingly average race. Then Kimi Antonelli's engine went, the safety car came out, and boy, do we have something to talk about. The big question being, though, should Max Verstappen have been completely disqualified from the Spanish Grand Prix? So this was the amusing thing. Max Verstappen ended up receiving a 10-second penalty. We'll get into that. But he did win driver of the race simply because the driver of the race voting ends before the race does, which is absolutely silly. Ridiculous if you ask us. But driver of the day, Max Verstappen started third, finished 10th. Well done. Well done to Max Verstappen. Yeah, I don't think he's anyone's driver of the day. Maybe the most stalwart Max Verstappen fan, potentially. But I think they need to have a good long hard in the mirror if they really genuinely think he's driver of the day over somebody like Nico Hulkenberg. But let's get into it. So, the crash. The incident, the ramming, whatever you want to call it. Let's see, shall we? So this was pre the actual incident itself. The safety car came out. Everyone went into the pits. Max Verstappen put on the hard tyres. They had new hard tyres, pretty much nothing else, which really sucked for Max. Because up until that point, he had been doing an absolutely stunning job. So the safety car comes in. Oscar Piastri leads them away. It was Lando Norris. He remained in second. And then we had this. So Max Verstappen, as you can see here, he is absolutely sideways. And then he carries on. And then from this time, Leclerc has some momentum against Max Verstappen. He's alongside him. And then they do end up hitting. Now, what was interesting in the post-race press conference, Leclerc pretty much admitted, yeah, I moved. That's pretty much the reason why we hit. But as you can see, in front of Leclerc would have been. It's hard to see. A lot of the tyre marbles, he was on the dirty side, so he was trying to manoeuvre on the right side. But yeah, ultimately, you probably have to say, okay, Leclerc potentially at fault here as they come together. You can see both cars kind of, not exactly straight on the straight, so to speak. So, and then we have a George of the Russell thinking, I'm going to have a bit of something here. So, the third place car behind them, he's now pretty much level with Max Verstappen, Leclerc a bit ahead, making a triangle trifecta of chaos as we then go into that first corner. Now, what's interesting here, you've got lots of space between both George Russell and Max Verstappen, as you can see. The sad thing is, that when we see them get pinched, Max Verstappen pinches George Russell. George has nowhere to go. Max Verstappen's not really giving him much space. But to be fair to Max, it's George Russell that kind of has a snap of, I think it's either oversteer and understeer, but his car snaps possibly in the aerodynamic wake of Charles Leclerc. That's where the problem, and then he ends up touching Max Verstappen, who then goes off and then comes back ahead of George Russell. And it's at that point where Red Bull are suggesting, Max, give the place back to George. Now, understandably, and I get it, Max is going to be very, very frustrated. But the issue being, now, George Russell is going along. He's thinking, okay, Max is slowing down. Max is leaving me space to go past. Clearly, we're swapping positions, albeit that's at least what George is thinking. I don't know what Max is thinking, but what I do know is at this point it's premeditated because, as you can see here, George is turning into the corner, and then we see the front wing of Max, and then gadoosh on George Russell's car. Rammed. I mean, you kind of do this in Grand Theft Auto. Lando Norris joked he's done this in Mario Kart. Never, though, with cars that are capable of going over 200 miles per hour, accelerating 0 to 60 in ridiculous amount of time. And let's be fair, people have been dead or seriously injured in Formula One. It is a dangerous sport. And what Max Verstappen did was very dangerous. Here we see again, Max Verstappen in the lead, George Russell in a bit behind him. Now, here's the interesting thing here. What I can't get is the difference in speed. Max slows down, and then he either appears to speed up or stop slowing down. It's definitely one of the two. We don't have, obviously, the telemetry, but here he's clearly letting George Russell by. George is like saying, thank you very much, Max. Now this is where it gets interesting, because this is where a lot of people, including ourselves, believe this is absolutely 110% deliberate. Look at the angle of the car now, going into the corner in this shot here. You can see George Russell angling towards the corner. Max Verstappen most certainly isn't. He's kind of angling straight ahead, and then kind of angling towards George's car. And then basically they hit each other. And then George Russell kind of goes a bit wide, and then Max carries on. So, in my eyes, and this is when Max Verstappen ends up letting George Russell through. So, George Russell then, he's thinking, okay, Max, I'm going to go through. You're going to let me through, because Max has been told to let him through. He's obviously, understandably, a bit cross. George is like, thank you very much. He starts turning into a corner, but then he sees Max, and you can see he's not turning as tightly now. And he's like, oh my darn, oh dear. Deary me, we've now hit. Max Verstappen's pretty much rammed me. Now, if that shot, you couldn't really tell here, where Max Verstappen's letting George Russell through. You can see George going through here. And it's the angle of the cars, once again, that tell the big story. Here, particularly, Max Verstappen, he's not really looking like he's trying to take the corner. He's not trying to take the corner. He rams George Russell. Pretty much, bang tidy. Max Verstappen Max Verstappen's guilty of that, 110%. So, driver of the day, maybe. George Russell has come out and saying he cost himself and his team a whole lot of points. Max Verstappen says, I don't need to say anything about it. I guess that's the equivalent to a no-comment interview, I imagine. So, Max was told, George criticised your move heavily and said he's worried about young kids watching this. What's your perspective? Fair enough. I mean, yes, George doubles down on this. And he says, well, I'll bring some tissues next time. Yeah, well done, Max. I mean, at this point, it's not one of these funny things, one of these 50-50 or 60-40 things. You blatantly round another driver and you've not got nothing to say for himself. Sometimes it is better to say nothing. But this is the short clip of the interview.
Where it came from, because you pull off something like the move in Imola, and we all see what...
Yeah, that move in Imola, great.
And it's horrible to see that shine taken off.
Is
there a comment about that? I think so, for fans and for kids watching, I think so.
Yeah? Okay, well, that's your opinion.
Yeah?
Yeah.
There's a lot of...
That's your opinion. Yeah, I mean, come on. I mean, sour-faced or what? As you can see, he's pretty unhappy. He just might have said no comment. No, that's your opinion. I imagine that's the opinion, potentially, especially when the telemetry comes back. He's already got that penalty official. Now, this is a throwback now to George Russell at the end of 2024, when he really doubled down on Max's attitude. And it's more apt now than anything. Let's have a reminder of what he said.
I need to take it personal. I have no idea why he's done that. And he cannot deal with adversity. No. Whenever anything is not going his way, he lashes out with unnecessary anger and borderline violence.
Now, when he says borderline violence, obviously using the car. Now, absolutely, people thought, oh no, George, you're kind of over-egging the violent pudding there, so to speak. But this cake of violence, yeah, absolutely. I think now the fact he's rammed it, because the difference is in the moment, it's still bad. I'm not saying you understand it, but the difference between a lot of Max's moves, like Brazil in 2021 with Lewis Hamilton, this one, he's about to let him through, and it was premeditated. Now, had one of us done something like this on the road, we'd be going to court. That's road rage. That's hitting a car. Driving dangerously, you get points on your licence for that. Yes, Max has got 3 points, I know. But I think it's a lot more serious than that. But let's let George carry on.
I've seen it in Brazil in the past with Ocon. You saw it in 21 with Lewis, and then Mexico with Lando. First race of the year in Budapest, when he didn't have the most dominant car, crashes into Lewis, slamming his whole team. That is not a guy who I respect. And you need to take it personal.
Yeah, that's not a guy who I respect. And I think, sadly, a lot of people are going to be falling in that same category. Here's the official document. Stewards, having received a report from the race director, have considered the following. Max Verstappen, car number 1. This is just 16:33, 33 minutes past 4. It was in the race. Car 1 collided with car 63 at turn 5. Breach of the FIN International Sporting Code, 10-second penalty, 3 points. He has a total of 11 for the 12-1 period. Here's the thing, I think he should have been absolutely disqualified, or just give him the 4 points, make him banned, because that kind of behaviour should not be in Formula 1 whatsoever. A premeditated ramming. I mean, the court would say there's mens rea there. He had enough time to think about his actions and do it. It most certainly was not in the moment. He decided to let him through and then decided to ram him. The question is, some people are maybe think, should this guy be in Formula 1? Well, they're in there. I mean, what happens then when he does something like this, and hopefully he doesn't, and then he injures someone? We're going to start looking back then and thinking maybe we should have done something sooner. But anyway, I digress. So the stewards reviewed positioning marshalling system data, telemetry and in-car video evidence. And it says from the radio communications, it was clear that car driver 1 was asked by his team to give the position back for car 63 for what they perceived to be an earlier breach by car 1 for leaving the track and gaining a lasting advantage. In fact, we had later determined that we should have taken no further action, but understandably, Red Bull were like, don't want a penalty. We're losing places anyway, maybe. I get it. But the driver of car 1 was clearly unhappy with his team's request to give the position back. Understandable. At the approach of turn 5, car 1 significantly reduced its speed, thereby appearing to allow car 63 to overtake. Yes. However, after car 63 got ahead of car 1, that's George Russell getting ahead of Max Verstappen, at the entry of turn 5, car 1 suddenly, and this is it, he accelerated. And there's the issue there. Confirmation. The accelerating, not even just like stop slowing down as much. No, he accelerated into car 63, therefore, in our opinion, ramming him. Max, you don't deserve to be in Formula 1. I'm sorry. I know a lot of Max Verstappen's fans are going to be like, oh, that's really, really harsh. No, he does not. Now he's done that, that's beyond anything else he's done. That's premeditated. He is a dangerous driver. He should not be in Formula 1. The fact that he accelerated, disqualified. Maybe I might be accused of overreacting, but you cannot have someone on there when things aren't going their way. That I completely understand. But then he decided to use his car as a weapon against George Russell to either make a point or, through sheer belligerence, throwing his toys out the pram like a toddler. You cannot have that. And this is a four times world champion doing this. People look up to him. I mean, in sim racing, he's done similar stuff. Obviously, it's not as bad. Retaliated. Think of Mexico where he retaliated against Lando Norris. Think of the braking when he pressed his brake button, brake at Lewis Hamilton, Saudi Arabia 2021. This man, yes, he does have 4 world titles. Is he deserving of it? By all means, his talent is. But in terms of his on-track action, I've heard he's a lovely person off the track, but his on-track action, can you really trust a driver like that? No. Can you respect a driver like that? No. Is this driver dangerous? Yes. Should he be in Formula 1? That is a massive question, I think, that we need to start asking. So the collision was undoubtedly caused by the actions of car 1. We therefore imposed a weak 10-second penalty on car 1. How weak are the FIA stewards? When you've got people in Formula 2 and Formula 3 looking up to people like Max Verstappen, you absolutely need to kibosh this completely and say, no, this is not happening again. Either okay, you are either disqualified for the Spanish Grand Prix or don't bother turning up to Canada. Competitors are reminded that they have the right to appeal. Yeah, how can you appeal that? Especially when you accelerated into George Russell. Disgusting. So, after all that drama now, my friend, let's have a look at the top 10. You've got Oscar Piastri, you've got Lando Norris, and you've got Charles Leclerc. George Russell finishes 4th, Hulkenberg in 5th, absolutely amazing. Lewis Hamilton 6th, Isaac Hadjar 7th, Pierre Gasly 8th, Fernando Alonso 9th, Max Verstappen in 10th. Shouldn't even be there, in my opinion. The thing about Max is, it's kind of like as George said, he's such a generational talent. He's going to be on the list someday of the best drivers ever in Formula 1 on his pure talent alone. When you look at what he did in Imola, it was really, really good. When you look at some of the moves he has made, it's amazing. Brazil, 2024, Germany, Hockenheim, 2019. Amazing stuff. And then he goes and does something like this. It's more than takes the shine off him. And it just makes me really, really sad. But I still say, you take the fact that you take away the fact that it's Max Verstappen and you have this driver A, say, for example, that keeps on doing this, he shouldn't be in Formula 1. Irrespective of the fact he's Max Verstappen. Nico Hulkenberg, let's finish on a good news story, shall we? Nico Hulkenberg, P5, absolutely well done to Nico Hulkenberg. Fantastic. driver of the... I mean, like, the driver of the day was stolen from this man. Starting 15th, finished 5th, past Lewis Hamilton in the twilight of the race. And Fernando Alonso, P9, first points of the year. Congratulations. Finally, well done, Lando. So if you made it to the end, give us a subscribe. If you vehemently disagree with me, let us know in the comments. Be a tiny bit respectful if you want. I appreciate it if you're a Max Verstappen fan and you're now furious at my comments. But there we go. Maybe you want to come on and we can have a debate. Absolutely. I'd thoroughly enjoy that. But until then, thank you very much for watching. See you next time. Hit that like button if you did like the video. It does make a difference. And speak to you soon. This is now where I try to find the outro button. I don't even know where the outro button is. It's gone. The outro button is missing, boys and girls. No, I found it. See you later. Bye.